So this is an industrial mixed-use building, meaning it's half office space and half industrial building. And in my opinion, these are one of the best kept secrets in real estate as an investment, meaning a building that you don't occupy. Now this particular building, this is my building, this is not actually the best investment. And the reason is these are typically best as an owner user. And so that's why this is for sales, because I sold my business, and because I sold my business, I no longer have a use for it. But in general, when you look at this entire building, if you were to purchase this whole thing, this is actually an excellent investment, and it's better than residential property for one reason, and that reason is the tenants, and I'll explain. You see, residential property, one of the biggest pros for people that are pro-residential or multifamily investing is obvious. You know, there's built-in demand because everyone needs a place to live. And so you have a lot of demand, which means therefore you have a viable business model because you have a lot of people that want to rent out your property. But buildings like this, as well as all of the other buildings in this area that are small owner-user type industrial buildings, are some of the best kept secrets. And the reason is, number one, the type of tenants, and number two, the type of leases that you do in this building. You see, most people are used to what's called, in a residential lease at least, you're used to what's called a gross lease. And what a gross lease is, what it sounds like, it's the gross payment, and it's the same every month. So if you rent a building and the monthly payment is, let's say, $5,000 a month, that's a fixed payment. It doesn't go up every month. However, the problem with this from an investment perspective is that you're stuck with any expenses that are incurred on that property. So if a toilet goes out, tenant's gonna call you and say, hey, toilet's out and I need you to fix it. And you're gonna say, okay, I'll get that toilet fixed. You have to send out a plumber. It comes out of your bank account, it comes out of your expense. And that's why these properties are better from a lease perspective, because what that means is if your property taxes go up, if your CAM dues go up, so if you have an HOA or any sort of expenses related to the building, then you get to pass on those expenses to the tenant. And the other best part of it is that you're not responsible for any of the maintenance. The downside with a normal residential property is, like I said, you're stuck with all the maintenance, you're stuck answering to the tenants. But when a tenant from one of these properties calls you and says, hey, the toilet's out, you say, that's great, call a plumber, why are you calling me? And they have to fix it. They have to pay to fix it. They have to pay to repair it. And the reason it's set up like this makes sense because these are businesses that have various use cases. And so oftentimes when they go into a place like this, you know, when you rent a property for residential purposes, you don't care if the living room isn't the perfect layout because it's a rental, and you deal with it. You don't tear down walls and make it your own. But in retail spaces and industrial spaces like this, people do what's called a build to suit, where they'll build the space to suit their specific needs all the time. And these build outs are expensive. And so the landlord's not responsible for any of the maintenance on any of the appliances, because if you're a restaurant, that's your business equipment and you're using that for your specific business. If a new business comes in, it's going to be different equipment. And so there's not overlap between these businesses. That's not the landlord's responsibility. And so anyone who's an experienced landlord that's rented out a lot of residential property, when they find out they can rent out these types of buildings to tenants, and they're not responsible for any of the maintenance, they don't have to schedule a plumber, they don't have to worry about the HVAC, and the other expenses like property taxes and insurance on the building, when those go up, you get to pass on that expense through the triple net lease to your tenant. And the business owner understands this, or at least most of them do, because this is the cost of doing business and this is how these leases are set up. So that's why I love them. Number one is the triple net lease, is because when I learned that as a business owner, when I was renting out my first commercial space, and I realized I had, rent that was going up every so often because of an increase in expenses, I was a little frustrated at first, but also as an entrepreneur and an investor, the light bulb went off that, this is actually a better investment in my opinion than residential, or just for my particular use case and my desire, because I don't want to deal with as many of the headaches and the phone calls and things like that that you do in a residential multifamily property, which requires professional property management. And so that's one of the reasons I love those properties. Now there's several other reasons I love these types of investment properties versus residential. And the other comes down to the fact that the base rent goes up every single period. And here's what I mean. In a normal lease on a residential property, you're leasing it out for a year, and then after that lease is up, maybe it might be 2 years in some instances, but normally it's a 1 year lease, maybe a 2 year lease if you're lucky. After that lease is up, normally it will either terminate or it will renew, and you'll renew at whatever rate. And so if you need to raise rent, that's the time to do it. And if you've had good tenants, sometimes you don't want to raise the rents because they've been good tenants, and so you don't want to raise the rent on them, and you understand, that added expense every month is not something That's worth it because you have a tenant that's paid you on time every month, so you want to keep them in there, and it's worth it for you to keep them. But in these leases, not only are they longer than 1 year, which I'll get to in a second because that's one of the other benefits, because your base rent has a built-in price increase that might be 3% every single year for the term of the lease. What that means is that every year you're not having to write a new lease that renews at a new higher rate. The new higher rate is automatic and it is included in the base lease price. Now, normally it's not a huge bump, so if you get a lot of price appreciation in an area, sometimes when it comes time to renew that lease after several years, which a lot of these leases, there's not a single lease here that's going to be under 3 years. Most of them are 3 to 5 and sometimes even 10 years. And on these smaller properties that I just walked by, which you're talking 1,000 to 2,000 square foot units, those are normally only going to be about a 1-year lease. But when you look at some of the bigger units, I'll show you in a second, oftentimes those are 5 to 10-year leases, and they have built-in price increases of 3% every single year for the life of the lease. So every year your rent goes up to account for inflation at a minimum, or some inflation. You're not having to deal with any of the issues that go into managing a property, such as maintenance or taking care of toilets or a clogged sewer. That's all the responsibility of the tenant. And you're not having to hustle every 12 months to get a new tenant in there, or to see if your existing tenant wants to renew and if they want to stay, and you're not having to have that conversation or that phone call. You can literally get one tenant in, and then they're in this property for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years or more, especially on some of those bigger buildings. Normally you don't see them much past 10 years, but that's why I absolutely love these properties, because you don't have to deal with the same headaches that you do when you're dealing with a residential property. But let's talk about some of the obvious downsides. Now, if you want to be a real estate investor and you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of cash, a lot of times people's first investment property will be a residential property, and oftentimes it's the first property that they bought as a personal residence. And the reason people do this is because you can get into those properties for a lot less money down. So if you're saving up for a down payment and you were able to save up 5% for the down payment, or 10%, or whatever you saved up for your first property, hopefully you're not listening to Dave Ramsey and didn't save up 20%, because if you had waited several years trying to save up that 20%, in a lot of markets, you'll be priced out of the market. And his advice, it's not grounded in reality anymore. So most people watching this video are not listening to him for financial advice, which is fine. But my whole point is that normally what you would do in the residential space is you'll go out, you'll buy a property, you'll live in it, and then afterwards you can rent it out. Now, the reason you don't see that done in these types of buildings as much in terms of an owner, user, occupant like my building I just showed you is because they don't pencil as much, because the highest and best use of these particular properties is as an owner, user property. And so owner users will pay a big premium to get into a building like this compared to what it would cash flow or rent out at. For example, if I wanted to rent this out on a cap rate basis at a 7% cap rate, this would only spit off cash flow that would support somewhere around a $400,000 purchase price, maybe $450,000. Now, this real estate is some of my favorite real estate from an investment perspective. Now, this is not the same as those small industrial condos that I talked about, but what this is this is industrial last mile facilities. And these types of facilities are used by companies like Amazon or FedEx or UPS or any last mile shipping providers, and they serve as warehouse facilities. So even as office space gets made more obsolete, as more and more people work from home, these types of buildings actually serve as an excellent investment, because there's built-in demand for the foreseeable future, because this is about getting people their stuff. And if there's one thing we all know about the American economy, it's that people love their stuff. So the chances of this becoming obsolete or not being used one day is slim to none. And even if it's not used for last mile, this is also a similar type of facility for a lot of other uses. Now, these types of buildings, because these are big operations typically, oftentimes they have 10-year leases with those built-in rate increases every single year. And the best part of these I haven't talked about yet, and that is when you build these from scratch, because the construction costs to build these, although construction costs have gone through the roof and recently a lot of deals have not penciled because interest rates are so high, these particular buildings are excellent because this is tilt-up construction, and typically you can build this stuff for between $250 and $300 a foot at today's prices. And the truth is, there's a lot of commodities that go into building a building like this, so that price can change and it can go up or down, but right now is an excellent time to buy or build a lot of these facilities. But honestly, if you can get a good deal on something below replacement cost, that's what I look out for as an investor, because you're buying something that people don't care so much what it looks like. And the fixtures inside are all simple fixtures, meaning you're dealing with a handful of bathrooms for the employees to use and a small office space typically for employees to use as well. And so it's mostly warehouse, which is low maintenance. You have some lights, you have some electrical, and you have some facilities, which, as you can see, this is set up as a shipping last mile type facility. This likely isn't going to be used for any sort of manufacturing. And when it comes to investment, the headache factor on these particular properties is very low by comparison with residential real estate. And one of my last and final points and favorite things that I absolutely love about this type of real estate from an investment perspective is that because you're dealing with business owners, typically you're dealing with tenants that have good credit to excellent credit, which means that if there ever is a dispute, this is not someone that's going to burn you and not care about their deposit, because they're more worried about being on the hook for any sort of damage that they cause, which is not always the case. Sometimes businesses go belly up, especially if the economy changes. But this type of property, even if there was another pandemic, if there was another shutdown, and businesses still need space to store their stuff before they deliver it to your house. And so these are an excellent opportunity for anyone that's looking to get into industrial real estate, or maybe you're just looking to invest in real estate and you didn't even know how interested in industrial real estate you were. And one of the benefits as an investor from a competition standpoint is that the barrier to entry on these types of properties is so much higher. They stay off of a lot of people's radar because these are multi-seven-figure buildings. There's a lot that goes into either building or the acquisition of these types of properties. But if you want to know how you can invest in this type of real estate, there's a link in the description on how you can get in touch with me. Or if you already know how to invest and you're a syndicator and you're looking for a local agent that can help you with boots on the ground, again, you can use that same link in the description to get in touch. So hopefully you found this video helpful, and let me know what you think in the comments. And right now there's a video popping up on the screen that YouTube thinks you should watch, so make sure you check that out if you haven't done so already. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.